it's a vessel for bringing people together. It's no more complicated than that. In fact, if we called it the Maudsley office building, we'd probably design the same thing. And the bottom strapline was access for learning for anyone at any time. Community within the build team, building for a community that sits outside it as well. And we delivered it on budget. We spent every single penny, but not a penny more. Proportion of each of the windows is about enough for a person to stand in, and it's almost like, you know, the kind of Corbusian modular man. It's like you stand and you envelop that space, you're up against the window, you can see back out into the street.
What buildings in London or further afield inspire you, or would you recommend others to see?
Am I inspired by buildings? I think I'm in a slightly different position to this, because I don't generally think, I don't have a kind of set piece or tapestry of buildings that I sort of start to think of as you know, those kind of showstoppers, the things which are kind of inspirational. I think as I've got a bit older, I can't believe I'm 50 in 2 years' time. So I'm already, you know, 3/5 of the way through my career. And what I've realised, and it's a really good question, whoever asked the question about this idea of you would never have known about the story of people, then I think it's that thing which I'm thinking is more important.
Yeah. So
I'm kind of almost purposefully more interested in the story of a different mantra, and I think and I don't quite know what it is yet, but it's something along the lines of, we make buildings that people will love and die in. You give the buildings, you pass the buildings over, and it's at that point that they have a life. And it's the life of the buildings and the people that flow through them and the experience of having delivered them, which I think is way more inspirational than any bit of brick or mortar in some way. But I'm looking at them differently. I'm not looking at them in the kind of objectification and glorification of architecture per se, but how do people really engage with them, and what inspires them and what inspires me about them. So it's continuous, it's kind of constantly kind of a morphic thing about how people flow through the city and how people flow through from one another. You know, last week I was in Tate Modern in the Turbine Hall, kind of wandering up through this kind of weird space. I was with my daughter, we got to the top, and London seemed to be kind of howling through this kind of the loggia at the top. And whilst it was the most weird thing, it was also the most uplifting moment.
How do you feel about having that continued relationship with a client post completion, like the architect being part of that narrative after it's finished?
It's not important, I don't think, necessarily. And the thing which I take more interest in, rather than my involvement, is just seeing others totally take ownership of the building, totally take ownership of the spaces, call it their own, and respond and shape the building in any which way they like. If I'm involved, it's great. If I'm not, it's also great.
Issues that, you know, are facing us as a people or whatever, like housing and those kind of issues, how can we play a role? Do you think we have a role, or do you think we're overemphasising our role?
In our practice, I'm interested in this idea that if we're custodians somehow of the city that we're working within, then surely it makes sense that the demographic makeup of the practice somehow has to be representative of the city that you're representing. And if it isn't, why isn't it? And that's not just a gender thing. It's kind of it's culture, creed, ethnicity, age, all those sorts of things. And it's a big ambition to try and make sure that it's clearly representative, it's equal, it's accessible. If there are hurdles in place, then work out how to remove them. So the housing thing, you know, I think if the practice itself can be far more of a representation of the community that it's serving. So if we're trying to deliver social housing or affordable housing, what is the demographic of people that live in social housing? How can we in some ways work with them in a way in which we understand their issues better?
And have you seen any changes about gender equality, things like that in the profession? What would you like to see happening?
It's a new thing for me, really, to talk a lot about. And again, I put it right down to a sort of change in circumstances over the last few years, which you're probably all aware of, and a sort of change in lifestyle, just a slight kind of mellowing in things which are important, and a reprogramming and this idea of opening up one's eyes. So the fact that I'm talking about it is a change. The fact that I'm involved in being interested in it is a change. Why has it taken me 47 years of my life to realise that it's more important? That's more important, you know. So maybe it's just one thing, and then there's a couple more people listen to this and think, oh yeah, that's kind of quite important. Small changes, and I think if we all do a little bit of small change, and then potentially there's an opportunity to change it all.
One final thing we wanted to say was we've got a small architects community here that we've sort of spread by word of mouth.
Yeah.
How do you think there's any way that the architecture community for young architects can work together better? And do you have any advice for us about how we can sort of encourage our peers?
Well, maybe tell me a little bit about your experience, because I hadn't heard of you before. Salads. But anything like this is obviously it's incredible. It's brought me back to a building which obviously I love. I've met a bunch of new people. There's been a couple of people in there that I recognise, and someone who I knew who was part of the building. So there are kind of so many stories and networks already. We're already a really small community.
Yeah.
Maybe you tell me a little bit about how you've got to where you've got to.
I suppose it's just continued interest in meeting up and seeing inspiring buildings, and it's about building a network, I think.
Yeah.
And of like-minded people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of quite low-key, and that's kind of a nice aspect of it, that it's more
intimate. It's like having a conversation with a friend every month.
And you want to keep it like that in a way, don't you?
Yes, but obviously if more people are interested, we would like it to grow, but it's about having that intimacy and that sort of friendship as well as professional relationship, but also allowing it to grow.
Coming back to your question, in some ways you are the answer. There's no real way of kind of being absolutely sure about where it goes, and that's kind of quite nice. I guess it's trying to again sort of bring the kind of human story back to architecture and the city. I guess is good. I mean, we started working on this thing called London On as well. I don't know how long you guys been going.
2013.
5 years.
5 years already. Wow. Okay. I mean, we've been in 2 years. But again, it's a sort of seeing what happens if you kind of create a platform for people to be part of something, and just let that part of something just evolve over time. Naturally, yeah. Not to push it, not to force it, not to have too much anxiety. You all have jobs, you all have a profession, so there's always something you can get involved in. You can be part of any affiliation, you can be activist, you can hold placards. But then there's this nice stuff which is like, a little bit more relaxed, and it's where you can, you get an opportunity to just sort of wallow in the beauty and love of what we do, I guess.